What happened to him? We don't even see him on Monday Night Raw as much as what we used to. Wade Barrett was Intercontinental Champion. He's no longer Intercontinental Champion. It's all about Daniel Bryan. It's all about John Cena and Daniel Bryan in the fallout of WrestleMania 31, which were some of the more memorable highlights from this year's WrestleMania, which was the only positive thing we got out of the fallout of this year's WrestleMania in comparison to what happened with Sting and Triple H, which was a huge letdown for me, along with Seth Rollins cashing in the briefcase to win the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. You know, out of everybody you could have put in the position of a John Cena, why was it Seth Rollins? Why was it not Dolph Ziggler? By the start of this year, it was supposed to have been Dolph Ziggler, WWE World Heavyweight Champion. What happened to that? Again, you know, it's the same thing. It's the same 3 or 4 people carrying the show all the time. If it's not John Cena, it's Randy Orton. If it's not Randy Orton, it's John Cena. If it's not Randy Orton, it's John Cena again. You know, it's back and forth between those two individuals. It's not 2002 anymore. That's my issue with the storylines in WWE. If it was 2002, I would accept the idea of John Cena being on top. But it's 2015, and we have an incredible amount of wrestlers who deserve a push in professional wrestling that they're never getting up to that point. They're never getting up to that point of John Cena. And as long as names like John Cena and Randy Orton exist and continue to thrive in WWE, it's going to be the same thing over and over, and nobody is going to get the opportunity of a John Cena or a Randy Orton. So I think it's really respectable that WWE is finally busting him down to the U.S. title division and thinking about letting him go because of things that is existing in his personal life and letting him deal with that outside of the professional wrestling business, because that door of opportunity swings open with the departure of John Cena, and the chances for Wade Barrett and Dolph Ziggler and Eric Rowan and Ryback to make names for themselves have never been greater and have never looked better since rumors of John Cena's upcoming departure became evident in professional wrestling. We have been reading about it on professional wrestling news websites, ProWrestling.com and even WWE.com itself, about how John Cena is the past. Some of the promos that are leading us to believe that John Cena is coming up on his departure from the company, along with how he's been discussing leaving professional wrestling for interviews on professional wrestling news websites and forums, are the promos of Triple H and Stephanie, where Stephanie McMahon actually liked the chant of yes with how John Cena was, you know, being referred to as the past. Now, wrestling fans didn't want to accept him being a 16-time champion eventually, or doing anything else with his career, not even being United States champion, and how Triple H had referred to him weeks ago for being the past. I think not more accurate assumptions had ever been made by two wrestling promoters when it came to Triple H and Stephanie McMahon's views on John Cena. And even in interviews that Triple H was doing on WWE.com, I don't think truer words have ever been spoken by promoters when it comes to how John Cena is being perceived in professional wrestling. And it seems as if WWE creative are finally listening to us as wrestling fans. We want John Cena gone, and they're finally listening to us and probably going to be giving him his walking papers over the next couple of months. So we have something to look forward to. Now, John Cena is in a program with Rusev that is looking very intensified over the last number of weeks. We're going to be seeing a Russian chain match at Extreme Rules between John Cena and Rusev, the first televised Russian chain match in years, which is something I'm looking forward to, because we could get to that pivotal point where John Cena gets kicked out of WWE or comes to a point of realization where he realizes, you know, I've done everything. If he loses the U.S. title, that is, I've done everything there is for me to do, and maybe it's time for me to take a step back and to make room for wrestlers like Dolph Ziggler and Daniel Bryan to make names for themselves in professional wrestling, because as long as I exist, they're not going to be able to, because they're going to be dropping matches to me. I'm going to be the one put over in these matches, and people like Daniel Bryan and Dolph Ziggler are never going to be made given the benefit of the doubt for anything that they do. So it's time for me to take a step back, and I really respect that about someone like John Cena, who has done everything. And maybe this is sounding like, you know, I've never been a fan of John Cena, but I'll be honest with you, I have never been a fan of John Cena, and that's why I've been very critical over John Cena for the better part of the last 5 years. I wasn't so critical of John Cena when he first made his debut in WWE, because I liked the heel John Cena, who had no respect for anybody. He would come out and cut these insulting promos towards people like Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, who were some of the best. They were referred to as legends at the time John Cena was coming in, after being involved with OVW as the prototype for what felt like forever. Jim Ross and Vince McMahon came in, gave him money to finance his gimmick, run with it the way that he wanted to, the way they did Stone Cold Steve Austin and names like Triple H and The Rock. of the past. And, he was being referred to as the next Hulk Hogan or the next Rock at that point. They believed he was going to be the man. They believed he had what it was going to take to main event WrestleMania for the 5 years after they had signed him in 2002 around the same time. They brought Randy Orton in. I had a chance to look at John Cena for one of the first times when he was brought in 2002 in July of that year, about a month or 2 months after he made his debut, and he wasn't the most entertaining wrestler on the house show that I had attended. He was working against Albert, who is known as Tensai now in the professional wrestling business. He was the first match on the show, and he was the most unentertaining individual they had brought out. The fans tried to rally against him that night. That was the interesting thing. The fans tried to support him, but they couldn't get the same amount of support they had for someone like Edge, who was in that night's main event for the SmackDown house show that I had attended. So, at the end of the night, I came away from it, knowing that John Cena had the potential, but he wasn't the most entertaining wrestler, not as entertaining as he became years after. He definitely proved his critics wrong, but at the end of 15 years, what is there left for John Cena to, prove? There's nothing for him to prove. There's nothing for him to prove in the way of a Daniel Bryan or a Dolph Ziggler, who have plenty left in the tank and plenty left to prove to critics out there who have jumped on the backs of people like Daniel Bryan and Dolph Ziggler, which is why, going back to what I originally said here, the door, momentum, and opportunity has never been swung open as widely as what it is now, with the departure of John Cena coming up for names like Dolph Ziggler and Wade Barrett to make names for themselves in the professional wrestling business. They tried to do it with names like John Cena and beating them, but as much as many times as they defeated names like John Cena, they were never able to do it because John Cena and Randy Orton always stayed with the business, and they always stayed on top, which is why, WWE say all the time all they care about are numbers. You will hear critics say that a lot about people like Vince McMahon and Triple H and John Laurinaitis especially, because that's all they care about. If you can put zeros at the end of a number for WWE, you're going to always be in the main event, and you're always going to be on top. You're always going to be in the main event of WrestleMania. And there's names like Daniel Bryan and Dolph Ziggler who get one opportunity to be in the main event of WrestleMania. And if they don't produce the numbers in the way of a John Cena or a Randy Orton over the last 10 years, for the better part of the last decade and a half, they're eliminated from the main event of WrestleMania, and they're back to 1A. In professional wrestling, there are very few wrestlers who get 2 or 3 opportunities to be in the main event of WrestleMania. And I think John Cena is up to 10 or 11 main events now at WrestleMania, which says a lot. He's at the level of a Hulk Hogan. And if you were to say 10 years ago to me that John Cena was going to be at the level of a Hulk Hogan by 2015, I would have looked at you in response and called you probably retarded or delusional, because, John Cena, in my opinion, did not have what it took to be at the level of a Hulk Hogan or at the level of a Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart. But that's what he's at to here in 2015, which is why I believe there is nothing left for John Cena to prove, and it's time for him to put his career and his life into perspective. Deal what he's got personally going on outside of the professional wrestling business, and if you want to, come back, and wrestle a scattered time like a Triple H or an Undertaker does now. But in my opinion, there's nothing left for him to prove, and I think it's time for him to go, as I've said about Triple H over the last number of weeks. I've been directly shooting on people like Triple H and John Cena in the fallout of WrestleMania 31, because this has been one of the most disappointing fallouts I have ever witnessed as a wrestling fan for a WrestleMania. And I'm not saying that just because Sting was kicked in the face and treated the way that he was in his match with Triple H this year, because you brought in a WCW icon and you had him lose his very first match in a WWE ring, which I deemed to be unacceptable. It's not the fact that I deemed it to be unacceptable because Sting lost. I'm deeming it unacceptable for the way that it happened, along with how Seth Rollins won the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, and we saw names like John Cena and Daniel Bryan come out of it with U.S. and Intercontinental Championships, respecting their respective divisions currently right now in WWE. It was a tremendous way to respect the divisions of the IC and U.S. titles, but the thing is, in my opinion, someone like a John Cena does not need a U.S. championship, not at this point in his career. If this was 2004 and John Cena was the biggest name you had on the SmackDown brand and you were getting him ready for a WrestleMania main event the following year by 2005 against JBL, I would accept this more. But it's 2015, and in my opinion, John Cena is considered a legend, and it's really time for him to start slowing it down. It's really time for him to really put his life and his career into perspective. And if he's going to go, there's no better time for him to go. If we've been talking about John Cena leaving the WWE and never coming back for the better part of the last 5 years, it's time for him to go now, and it's time to make room for the up-and-coming names like a Daniel Bryan, like a Neville, like a Dolph Ziggler, like a Wade Barrett, who deserve these opportunities, who are not getting them, as long as names like Randy Orton and John Cena continue to remain with the business and remain on top. You know, what's interesting about Randy Orton is I referred to Randy Orton for being Triple H and Stephanie's bitch in both a written column and for a video blog that I dropped on this YouTube channel, because that's really what he is. It's either about Randy Orton or it's about John Cena. And I don't want to stand corrected for anything that I've said about the professional